Create Africa, the webinar. My name is Wahiga Muturi. I'll be your host for this evening. And I have very interesting people on the channel today. I really am looking forward to have a very good conversation with one and all. But before we continue, welcome to Let's Create Africa, the webinar. Yay, my people, welcome back once again to Let's Create Africa, the webinar. My name is Wahiga Muturi, and I'll be hosting some very interesting people today. I'm looking forward to that. Guys, before I forget, our favorite people who have actually helped us to make this happen, Startinav, which is an innovations ecosystem enabler. Let's Create Africa, which is an entrepreneur support organization leveraging on PR, comms, media, and advocacy to give opportunities to people at the bottom of the pyramid, and the Future of Work, which is an jobs platform. Last but not least, Know Your Rights Africa. Know Your Rights Africa is a civic and citizen education platform. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Climate Summit is officially over. I don't know, are you guys happy about that? Imelda,
yes.
Lucy, are you guys happy about that?
To some extent, things were becoming too expensive in Nairobi.
I agree.
Why are you blaming Nairobi?
When is this thing going
Nairobi is just a city like any other. Oh my God, Lucy, what do you think?
Okay, the week is still there because we still have today and tomorrow for the week, but at least the summit is done. So I think I'll hold my excitement till the week is done. There's still room for a lot to happen.
Brilliant. But ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Climate Summit is officially over. It happened this week, and with very many other side events from the 4th to the 6th of Wednesday, which was yesterday. Today, these guys are chilling. That's why they're able to join us today. But there was a lot of glitz, pomp, merry and hopeful promises during the Africa Climate Summit. Was it all a show, or finally Africa will get an official seat at the table? That's question number one, and it's okay, guys, just be easy. You don't need to answer it right now. Was it a success or a major flop? Because that also matters to the people on the ground. What is an actionable outcome? Or was there a knee-jerk reaction effort by begging presidents? And I won't even mention any. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this exclusive interview to discuss the African Climate Summit, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And my outstanding panel, who I'll have to let introduce themselves because, I can't introduce them. They are too high and honorable at the moment. So I'll let them do this because, man, I don't want to disappoint them. But I'll start with Imelda Tenkeo, AMA Digital Communications and Social Media Editor at Greenpeace Africa. And allow me to mention also whoever else has joined us, Lucy Njeri Irongo, focal person, Kenya African Perspective. The rest will be joining us as we continue. That's Patrick Kariuki, co-founder of Kenyan Foreign Policy.com, and last but not least, Wanjiku, Dorcas, founder, CEO, Kipepeo Green Heritage. So Imelda, let me start with you because you're not Nairobian enough, but not to say anything involved, but please take over.
Thank you very much, Wahiga, for this opportunity to have such interesting, intriguing, and insightful conversation with high skill experts in the milieu. My name is Imelda Tenko. I am a Cameroonian based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I'm currently pursuing my master's in digital communication, as well as, like you said, being a comms professional in the environmental space. Yes.
Thank you very much. Lucy, your turn.
My name is Lucy Njeri Irungo. I am the focal person Kenya for African Perspective. So, African Perspective is a platform, a youth led platform that is harnessing on the power of digital technology to advance peace and security. And you will ask, being in the peace and security space, what am I doing in a climate change conversation? So, basically, the link between peace and climate change, just allow me, Wahiga, to explain, is that a lot of
Yes, please.
conflicts are related with natural resources, for example, scarcity of water, pasture, and even shared natural resources. So those conflicts end up being affiliated with climate change, and that's where we come in as an organization. Yeah.
Good. Lucy, actually, just because you started, please tell us more about the Kenya African Peacepective, actually. Sorry.
Yeah. So what we do about the reason why we decided to start the platform, it came from the recognition that a lot of peace and security matters are handled in a very technical way, and the technicality of it ends up marginalizing the communities, or rather the people who are directly affected by peace and security issues. For example, if we talk about pastoral communities in this case of climate change, did we actually see any representation of pastoral communities that are directly affected by climate change in the summit? So our platform.
Hey, before you come, before you throw those shots, please just tell us first, Peacepective. What are you guys about? But thank you for actually alluding to that. We'll get into that. But please, just tell us more about the organization and why this is something that you've enjoyed to be a part of.
So basically, if I could just summarize it, is using citizen journalism to put the voice of the real people being affected by conflict out there. So perspective is from two words, peace and perspective. So we link it into one word. Yeah, so basically that's it in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Somebody was already throwing shots. We weren't ready. We weren't ready, girl. Hilmelda, please tell us about your organization and why you do what you do. It would be interesting to actually get a background on that.
Yeah, I mean, Greenpeace Africa, we all know, is an organization for change based on advocacy and just trying to put together the people that need to hear what the information is, and the people that want to act or who are directly affected by what's happening. So we talk about, for instance, here in Kenya, with the lifting of the ban on logging, through Greenpeace, we were able to, they, before we joined, were able to gather about 10,000 signatures to the petition that they sent out, which they submitted to the government. And nothing has been done. And I was waiting to hear something about that during the summit, talking about shots. We're talking about, we came into the summit at a time when the government had passed all of these bills and imposed all of these sort of laws, and we are expecting to see how these will be either tackled or explained, not justified, explained to people, that these weren't mentioned, or at least I didn't hear anything about them. So maybe someone can tell me if they heard anything about the justification beyond profit making and beyond job.
Okay, you guys are out for the jugular. I don't know why, guys. We've just begun the show. We've just begun the webinar, so be easy. We are coming to that. Wanjiku and Patrick, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Brilliant, Wanjiku. Please introduce to us Kipepeo Green Heritage and also who you are, what you do, and what you're about. Oh, and she disappeared. Patrick, can you hear me? Okay, as they pick up on that. So, Hilmelda, let's start with the good, please, before we start throwing stones. What has been the good of the African Climate Summit for you? For you, not for your organization, even for you as an individual.
Of course. And I'd like to put a disclaimer. I'm not here to talk about Greenpeace. So anything I say, no one should hold it.
Use
Yeah,
it against you.
to hold it to the organization. Pick the battle with me, not with the organization. Um, Now,
Good.
talking about the summit itself, Bloomberg called um, His Excellency President William Ruto a champion for climate change in Africa, and I believe so. And this materialized further with this summit, and seeing how it happened. Kenya being the first count. I mean, the summit itself is happening for the first time, on African soil. And we are so happy that for once we were not handed a conference. Most of the time when something is happening over here, it's the UN that's handing over, saying, okay, you guys will host, or other organizations, handing over. But this time around, we decided we need these conversations to happen. We need to hear from our people, because when we go to your countries, when we go to events organized by you and summits organized by you, you dictate what we hear. You dictate who comes. I mean, even here, we'll get into organization in a bit, but at least we had people that we could relate with. I mean, I was part of a panel, an intergenerational panel on climate change, and that was very insightful to see me, some other guy from Ethiopia, the CEO of the summit itself, and the former minister of, I think, environment for Kenya. That was interesting to see how that bridge was being created in what other people have done and what we are coming in to do, and as well as what we need to do to come together. So, in just to summarize my point, I think this is a very important platform created by Africans for Africans to contribute to African solutions and to make sure that we are bringing African solutions to African problems, with our perspective. Whether it happened or not, at another conversation. At least it was the platform. And when I look at the declaration, I mean, I am hopeful for what was written. However, we almost always know that what is written doesn't always translate to what happens. But yeah, we're hopeful. We're hopeful.
Good to hear. Good to hear that. Wanjiku, can you now hear us?
So,
Kindly introduce yourself. Hopefully, we'll get to hear from you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you, ma'am. We can't hear you. Okay, Lucy, as we get to fix that issue with Wanjiku, Lucy, let's get your perspective on the good. What happened that actually worked for you?
Okay, I actually agree with Lumelda in the sense of I think it was a great opportunity for Africa to be at the forefront of agenda setting, because most of the times, especially in multilateral setting, what we see is the hegemon setting the agenda. And by hegemon, I mean these are developed countries that already have economic development and political power in it. So what happens is that we find a situation whereby the agenda is being given out to Africa, and you're told, okay, you're going to host this, or let's say, this is how we are going. This is what is going to be talked about. Just show up. But then, being a summit, the first of its kind, first of all, that was actually initiated by an African country, Kenya being the host, and the African Union. So I think for the first time, we also felt uh, the African Union being driving African solutions, because much of the time is whereby you find we are facing a lot in Africa, but the African Union is nowhere to be found. So I think in terms of agenda setting, I think for African Union and also for Kenya, that was quite impressive. Secondly, I was very impressed that for the first time, Africa is going with a common foreign policy, because what happens in a lot of multilateral setting is that you find African countries are very segregated in terms of we go as Kenya, as Uganda, as Cameroon, as Zimbabwe, but never as Africa. Each country, each African state is usually there to push their own personal interest. But in this particular set, we saw a lot of unification among the African states. And even when the African presidents showed up, you could see representation from West Africa, from Central Africa, from East Africa. So you couldn't say probably it was an East African thing or it was a West African thing only. So I think also that representation was quite impressive. And then another thing that, and it will come during the discussion, is to actually hear African countries taking a stand and saying this is the kind of financial architecture and structure we want for Africa was quite impressive, because much of the time again we see financial global financial institutions such as IMF and World Bank handing over agendas and projects to be implemented in Africa without the say of African states or even projects that are going to benefit African people. So to actually see African leaders taking a stand on that and saying for the longest time possible there's a problem in the economic global structure and we need to have a balance in that, I think was quite impressive. And then finally, I mean, the involvement of stakeholders, I was very impressed to actually learn there was a children's summit, to even see children being involved, indigenous communities, the youth. There is a balance and arguably on that, but I think for the first summit it was quite impressive. Yeah.
Interesting. Good. Wajiko, can you hear us,
Yeah.
ma'am?
Mm.
Brilliant, and we can hear you finally. Please introduce your gracious self and what your organization actually does. Let us hear from you even as we continue with the conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much. Hi to everyone. My name is Wanjiku DK of Kipepeo Green Heritage. We are a tree planting organization. We work across the country with women, youth, and children. Our main interest is turning the country green using tree planting of fruit trees, very particularly fruit trees, because they feed society, they harness income, and yeah, we mitigate climate change on the go. Thank you so much.
Wow, short and sweet. Wajiko, because now you've already picked. Patrick, are you still there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Brilliant, Patrick. We can now hear you, but we can't see you, unfortunately. We would be very happy to see you. Grace us with your presence, sir. But anyway, if you can hear us, please tell us about yourself and your organization, the KenyanForeignPolicy.com. You're the co-founder. Kindly let us hear from you.
Okay, so my name is Patrick Kariuki.
Hello, Patrick. Oh, good.
I am of KenyanForeignPolicy.com, a media organization that. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, loud and clear. Continue.
Yes, we can.
We can hear you loud and clear. Hello, Patrick. We can hear you loud and
So
clear.
I was saying Kenyan
We can
foreign
even see you.
policy. Kenyan foreign policy is. Yes. Hey, Bwana. I was saying Kenyan foreign policy is a media organization that shines the spotlight on Kenya's engagement with the rest of the world, basically. And this is by the fact that Nairobi is a global city in the sense that it is the only headquarters of the United Nations outside of Europe and outside of North America. And we host virtually every international agency, every embassy, and every international company or organization that you can think of, whether you're talking about Facebook, Microsoft, Google, whether you're talking about different agencies like UNHCR, whether you're talking about embassies from the Russian embassy to as small as the Eritrean embassy, and of course the United Nations itself. So Kenya is a global diplomatic city. Nairobi is a global diplomatic city, and Kenya is therefore, and therefore it makes sense to understand how Kenya is using its highly strategic position to engage with the rest of the world. What impact are we having? And I suppose the African Climate Summit was one of the very many things that Kenya does to engage with the rest of the world. I think it showed the amount of leverage that the country has. We may not be a very big military power, but we're definitely a big soft power or diplomatic power. And therefore, the climate summit proved that, showed the kind of clout that the country has. We were very glad to see that and to cover that. And also, yeah, so that is what we do. We just want to explain to our readers everything that Kenya is doing on the international scene and the results that we are achieving. Now, my
Brilliant.
thoughts
Thank you for
on
that,
the climate
Patrick.
summit.
And
What
you,
were my thoughts?
yes, please.
Yes. So my thoughts
Starting
on
with
the
the good,
climate
sir.
summit. Yes, the good was that the climate summit was reasonably well organized in terms of the summit itself. It was. I've been following, on Twitter, the people who attended. They're posting very good things about this, about Nairobi, how beautiful Nairobi is. Of course, they only saw the side of Nairobi, but we will take the compliment. Issues were raised at the summit, and were very well articulated. Our president was very visible. I was very glad to see even Raila Odinga attending the summit, which shows, if nothing else, that this is a country that is politically mature, where the leader of the opposition can attend an event organized by the government, and he is actually received on the red carpet by the deputy president, who is his political nemesis. These are things that that are very important. Many other countries they don't have this sort of thing, So Kenya is, even out of the world, Kenya is a country that is quite democratic and quite liberal and politically stable. And I think we proved that with this summit. Now, as for the bad, there was two things which I noted.
No,
The
no, no,
first thing,
no, 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 no. Patrick, before
yes,
we get there, just hold your horses. Hold your horses. We are not yet there, so don't worry. We'll get there. I
okay.
actually want to go back to Wanjiku. Wanjiku, what was the good side for you? Because that was something you also didn't mention, but we'd like to hear.
I think I love the fact that for the first time, we did insist as a continent about accountability on climate financing promises. And we spoke in one voice on what we would like to see happen. I hate we talked about financing. I mean, money coming in instead of what we can do for ourselves. But at the end of the day, the world owes us. So, yeah. We also had the first lady.
The world owes
Yes,
us.
they do. They do. We had the first ladies pavilion. I am yet to be convinced about what the first lady is really doing about climate change and the youth and climate education. But I mean, she gave us the platform. So there we go. I'll be watching.
Lucy mentioned about the children. Why? And I saw you shake your head very hard. Why was it good? Why was it good? I mean, we could have done everything else. Why? Why was that something that caught your attention and you were happy about?
Because number one, Kipepeo works with children, but at the same time, we are inspiring the next generation of green hummingbirds. So giving them a platform, of course, we have a number of kids we can list by name, but at the same time, kids were inspired across the country. We had calls, like us guys have been receiving calls to visit primary schools across the country, just out of the experience of the schools, of the students that were, at the platform, ACS. But at the same time, I'm also questioning the fact that it was the kids of who and who, and kids.
She was onto something.
Public streets.
Sorry.
She was onto.
We have kids who school. Yeah.
Sorry, we had lost you for a bit, but continue.
Oh yeah, we have
Imelda
kids
is
in
cheering for you.
classrooms. We have kids who school. Who are struggling. Floods are coming. We were told El Ninos are coming, and we have kids who won't be going to school because of the challenges of the. So at that point, I asked myself, what are we doing to mitigate and protect those kids who we hope will be our green champions in years to come?
Interesting. Hilmelda, before I get onto you, for those who don't know, the African Climate Summit was actually achieved some good things, starting with that we were able to achieve a $23 billion worth of climate funding pledges, which were made at Nairobi, actually made at the venue. It also brought the continent together to agree on a climate action plan, and which also reminds me, we might actually segue into the Nairobi Declaration, which was a very interesting conversation also. And last but not least, For once, we had a very major climate summit actually officially organized in Kenya. But not even just Kenya. It's not a win for Kenya. It's Africa in totality. So, Hilmelda, I saw you are on the edge. Please tell us
Yes,
tell us what you are riding on from
I was
Wanjiku.
agreeing on her points with children, not because, I mean, let's agree that it's a good thing that children were there, and it's good optics, from soft power point of view. If my younger sister sitting back in Cameroon sees that, she's like, okay, there are these young people talking about, climate change. I might as well be interested. What are they saying? I mean, they're my peers. So from the soft power perspective, I understand what impact it has. However, we didn't have children talking about what they know. We had children who were handed over documents to read, to cram and read. And I saw it with my own eyes. So there's this lovely girl from I think she was from Mali or Chad, and she was asked, when she was given the mic, you knew she was reciting something like a poem. And then the moderator asked her a question, the way we are having a conversation here, and if I say something that intrigues you, you might want to know more. That is when I knew this child everything she said was scripted. Because when she was asked the question, guess what she did? She repeated exactly what she previously said, word to word, word for word. And the moderator was asking,
Hilmelda, even before you continue, was that really a disappointment for you, and why? Or you are kind of like, well, it's expected, it's a child, so it's okay to actually be given something to read? Is that really a bad thing? Just your perspective.
yeah, I think it was a bad thing. Like I said, when we leave the soft power perspective, it was a bad thing because we need to know. I mean, there are children like Dorcas mentioned, or like Wanjiku mentioned, who are actually going through these things, who can tell you way more than you and elder can sit and write and give and give to a child to recite. And those children could be found in each of the countries where these children were resourced from. So that's how you know these children. I mean, they probably went to a community and said, we want a child here. And maybe she probably had something to say as well, but they said, no, we'll give you something to say. How about you let her tell a story? Because if you let her tell a story, then she can touch me. If you let her tell a story, if you ask her a question about how is climate change, stopping you from accessing stuff like food, or are you able to go to school? What are the challenges you're facing, and how are those linked to climate change? She's able to give you a response that's personal and that's real, as compared to a scripted response that she can't defend. If you ask any question about it, she
Okay.
doesn't know what to say because she was given that piece of writing.
Lucy, you're shaking your head too much, so please, the floor is yours.
Okay. I to some point I agree with both Manchiko and Himelda, but then again we go to the technicality of how we actually communicate climate change matters, because the experts within the climate change space has made it very complex. For example, the summit was really dominated by carbon credits. I don't know, carbon credit and benefit exchange. What does that mean to a common person? What does that mean to someone who is living at the ASALs? And then what are our priorities? So I think one of the things why we see there's a gap in how we are communicating climate change. And I was in one of the side events where the media was saying we are actually not able to clearly define what exactly the agenda of the summit was, because it has really been dominated with a lot of finance talk, a lot of carbon talk, a lot of big words like I had green discount. What is green discount? Green investment. What is green investment? Can we narrow it down and bring it back to when we are facing floods and we are facing drought? What is the imbalance on that? Why is it that one time we are doing very well, and then the other time we have areas where we have a lot of heat, we are facing drought, and then at the same time we have floods going on? How can we commercialize our asals areas? Because especially as Kenya, we have a lot of arid and semi-arid areas. What are the conflicts that are coming out of this? How can these conflicts be handled? What happens if we have food scarcity? How is climate change affecting the high cost of living and the high cost of food products? That is the language that is supposed to dominate an African summit. Yeah. But then we understand.
Tosha, it's okay. Lucy, it's okay. You, I don't know why you guys are waiting for trouble, but I mean, I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear the conversation behind the Africa Climate Summit, and not just because we want to talk about the bad. We want to talk about every perspective of what happened. Wanjiku, just digging into what Lucy said. Let's hear your thoughts, especially because we're talking about communicating for climate change. Wanjiku?
Okay. So for me, it is more about the Mwananchi on the ground. Remember, we had MP Salasia get a question on explaining what is happening at KCC, and whatever he said was bullshit. Let's be honest. For an MP. And yet today we had a
let's mind our language, Wanjiku.
No,
Wanjiku, I know this is an emotional topic, but let's mind our language because of my audience. Tafadhali.
Okay, we are sugarcoating a lot on assuming that the who's who understand what climate change is and what we were trying to tell the people and tell Africa. But looking at the fact that today morning there was a parliamentarian session and they're going to give their own declaration to the president, what will they be talking about? What will they be saying? Since they are a representation of the people, does Mwananchi down there understand truly what is happening? I don't know, and I don't think we are doing it right. We need to go back and speak in a language that the people understand, that the children understand, that the future generation knows this is what we are doing and our why.
And what? Let me just take from that, Wanjiku. What exactly is the language? Is it our local dialect? Is it English? The international language? Is it Swahili? What exactly do you mean by communicating in a way people understand? Who's even the target audience?
The truth is, most of the people who attended that summit will not be on the ground doing climate action, will not be on the ground leading adaptation and mitigation. It's Mwananchi. It's that person in Mali. It's that person suffering droughts in Somalia. Are we making them understand in a language, in an easy English? We had about 32 presidents in attendance, but did their people even feel what was happening in Africa, why it was for them? How much the monies that have been given will impact their lives? What change are we looking to? I don't think we need to go down and demystify some more. We need to go to the churches, we need to go to the communities and speak a language that they understand. And that is telling them, this is how El Ninos will affect you because of 1, 2, 3. We need to do 1, 2, 3 in this way. What do you think we can do to empower the women, the youth, the future generation, that is the children? How are we going to feed our children? Some of those questions have to be answered by the citizens, not we bringing solutions to them. It is them helping us mitigate and understand what works for them.
Good. Patrick, are you still there? We need your voice in this one. But Hilmelda, borrowing from Wanjiku, because she's talked about a lot of foreign conversations and the language and communication and the target audience. I think from your perspective, do you think the people in your country, the very connection between the ones making policy and the ones doing the action, was that even met with this first summit? By the way, please remember, this is just the first summit. What do you have to say around that?
Thank you very much for that question, Wahiga. I think that we forget that when you interview or just talk, have a conversation with anybody on the street in my village, no one will talk to you mentioning climate change or carbon or financing. All these huge terms we are using, deforestation. They'll tell you someone cut that tree, they won't call it deforestation. And so that calls to storytelling. And that calls to, again, if we are having a summit in Africa that's trying to find African solutions to African problems, I think the language has to change. We can't use imported language to communicate our solutions, the solutions that we think we have come up with. And but there is hope, because I saw there is an organization in a community-based organization in I think it's in the South Kivu of the DRC, who are coming up with a curriculum because they realized that their community is really sort of entrenched in their cultures and traditions, and people do not, the students there, the pupils there, the children in that community do not relate to school the way that, you know, people in maybe Kinshasa or the rest of the world relate to school. So they decided, how about we build curriculums in the language that these students understand? And I think that same approach has to be brought to climate change. It's not to say that our people are dumb. It's saying that the language you are speaking is foreign, and if you want us to understand what you're speaking, you need to make sure that you're using the right terms. The UNDP recently published the Climate Dictionary, and I implore everyone to take a look. There are words that you might have never heard before, but I guess that's to the conversation. So we, the elites, you know, those who are informed about these things, we are the ones who are saying the ACS was, you know, a success. You know, it was a platform for us. The majority of Africans, I'm sure, do not know that this conference happened, do not know why it happened, do not know how the outcome of this conference summit will sort of help them get them out of this. I mean, it's raining now. How many people in Nigeria are affected by raining, and the water is, you know, flooding their houses? Are they aware that this ACS happened? You know, how does that translate to a better life for them? So this summit, as much as it was a success, I must say the communication around it was not appropriate at all. And I'm not even going to hold my tongue while saying this. It wasn't appropriate. You know, it's easy. If I call my mother right now and tell her, oh, there's a summit that happened here, do you think it was a good thing? I think she'd probably tell me, I don't care that it happened. How does it affect you? I mean, I think she will. I think my siblings will. To say that when we are saying that we are looking for African solutions to African problems, we need to rethink the language. We need to rethink the canal, the means, the medium through which these solutions are going through. And if you're going to find solutions that will be implemented by the majority, then I think the candid thing, the more civil thing to do, is to make sure that you're able to translate these solutions, because we're here making decisions, but we are not the ones implementing these decisions, and that's where the problem comes in.
Patrick, can you still hear us? I can see you there. Hello, Patrick. Okay. I hope you're still there. Hopefully you'll cue in when you can. Lucy, you can hear us?
Yes, I can. I think. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, loud and clear. So I just want you to pick up on on Hilmelda's conversation. Let us hear your thoughts, not only on foreign policy and the meeting point between the people doing the action and the people making the policy. Let us hear. I think I've already given you some meat.
Okay. Two things. One thing is every time you have such summits, whether hosted by Africans for African solutions or whether actually Africans are being invited, as Africa, we always feel like we are running out of time. And that's why we find that we don't even have time in these summits to actually create a list of our priorities and say this is what you're moving in. For example, the summit, as Imelda has said, we have financing, the financial cost. These are the same talking about green investment. You're talking about renewable energy. Behind, we need to catch up. And then in the midst of all that, there's a lot of implosion going on in Africa. One thing I felt from even going around the expos is I feel a lot of so-called investors, some of them, and also some of these organizations are using Africa as experimental ground. And I will give an example. I go to an expo and I find one of the embassies from a Western, a European country. On their expo tent, they have what they are calling commercial forestation, and I ask them, how visible is commercial forestation for Kenya, a country whose forestation percentage is at I think 8.5%? And then this is the same country that is facing a logging problem, and this is the same country that has a very high percentage of the assaults. Yeah. If you are really, really interested in investing in Africa, in investing in Kenya, you need first of all to understand the indigenous people. And I think one of the representatives of the indigenous people said, what we are having is, it's not that solutions are not being implemented. We are having solutions by people who think they have more solutions than the indigenous people who have been living in these lands for the longest time. Indigenous knowledge is not being involved in this. And that's why again we go to the aspect of, we will, a document is there, fine, it's a very good document, but then when it gets to COP28, it is going to be overshadowed by the needs and the experiments and the curiosity of that foreign influence that is there. So how again can we move from that? One thing I think, as African countries, we need to take a stand. And simply because someone is an investor, simply because someone is a donor, does not mean they're welcome in Africa to implement anything and everything they feel that they can. We need to have an agenda and say, if you're coming to invest in Africa in anything climate change related, these are our priorities. Yeah. And then we also need partnerships, because we have a lot of projects going on. For example, I was hearing JZ is doing something, JICA is doing something in Turkana, UNICEF is doing something in Turkana, WFP is doing something in Turkana. And then I ask, if all these organizations are really doing something in Turkana, then why have they not solved the drought problem in Turkana? Because it seems that everyone is in Turkana. So that means there is inefficiency and a gap in the projects that are being implemented. And that's why we need a partnership. And we also need African governments to take a stand and say, these are our priorities. If you want to fund anything in Africa, fund that. And this is our criteria of implementation. Yeah.
Interesting. And that's your perspective as a foreign policy expert, I assume?
Yes, because again, I understand that foreign policy is very important, but then the power of foreign policy is that every state has the power to determine its own foreign policy. So, for us to actually move away from this relation of, because the current relationship we have between African states and developed states is an imbalanced one. And unfortunately, African states are at the bottom of that spectrum. They're always at the receiving end. Yeah. So simply because you are donating money does not mean you should dictate the projects that should be implemented. And I understand where African presidents are coming from by saying we actually need to move from the from we need to move to a talk of climate justice. We need to talk about loss and damages, because some of this foreign policy donation comes from a talk of we are helping Africa, but you're not helping Africa. You guys have actually benefited largely from industrialization that is causing a lot of emissions. So that loss and damages has to be balanced. So I totally understand where they're getting from, and in a way I actually understand their urge to demand that we need a structure, that we have climate tax where the polluter has actually to pay for that taxation, and that taxation benefit has to be felt by the people who are facing the greatest adverse effects of climate change, and that unfortunately happens to be Africa. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Let me just read some comments here from our viewers. Emo Ching, thank you very much. Such an insightful conversation. Elizabeth Nduku, amazing discussion here. Thank you very much. Adior Ibrahim says, very interesting conversation. Janet Onyango says, to be fair, even Greta Thunberg reads her angry speeches from a script. I think she's referring to the conversation of having children on the platform. She also continues and says, for the smooth organization of an event, speakers need scripts. You can't expect a child to speak off the cuff. That's not realistic. Even adults
Sorry, that was a
can't do
panel
it.
conversation. That was not a speech. That was a panel conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Noted. Mushugia Nganga says these things always have been happening. It's not something new. But let me move on to Patrick. Patrick, can you hear us? Okay, Patrick, we're still waiting to hear from you. Wanjiku, can you hear us? Great. From your perspective, what do you think was the advantage of having foreign experts and foreign conversations at the summit? Do you think it was even important? If you don't mind me asking, let me hear from you. Oh, we can't hear you. Unfortunately, we still can't hear you. Yes, very much. Thank you.
I believe it was called African Climate Summit for a purpose. African for Africans to find African solutions, not foreign experts. You can't be living abroad and you tell me how soil in Kenya is going to work. You can't come from Russia and tell me how fertilizer is going to affect soil in Kitale, or maize will not grow, or the floods are going to continue hurting people in Kenya. No, it is the people who wear the shoe who feel the food. That is what should be happening. We should not be. We have our own educated experts. I mean, the ACS just finished, and we didn't even acknowledge our own Nobel laureate, the late Professor Wangari Maathai, who was an expert in matters climate change and all matters in that line. Then we wake up and say,
so
we are finding solutions from abroad. No, we have experts who are local, not foreigners. Our people should find our own solutions. That's.
But do you think we could have done a summit without foreign contribution?
Yes, we could. We could. I mean, of course, Africa, forget about African Union. It's a backing dog, sorry to call it that way.
Your opinion?
We need money from abroad. But I mean, if every country committed without the idea of aid has to come in, and we decide this is how we are going to do it, an African way to heal our people and to heal our land, we would have done it. Then taken the declaration to the COP as Africa, not as influenced by outsiders. That's my position.
Patrick, can you hear us? Because you're also a foreign policy expert and writer.
I can hear you, but I'm wondering why you can't hear me.
No, we can hear you.
Now we can hear you loud and clear. We actually just can't see you, but it's okay.
Yes, so what's the question again?
Just what's your opinion about having foreign experts who we really needed to have in this conversation? Do you think it was necessary? Was it important actually having the foreign community also join us for the African Climate Summit?
Yes, no harm with foreigners joining us because climate is a global phenomenon. The solutions to climate are global. The causes of climate have not been caused by they've been caused by those foreigners. I think what was lacking was that, I mean, it's obvious Africa is only responsible for 3.8% of all carbon emissions in the world. And if you go back throughout history, if you aggregate where the problem has come from, if Africa has contributed at all to climate change, it's only 1%. So if it were up to me, I would have wanted those global players to come here and listen what they owe Africa and be made to pay up. It was very funny for John Kerry, for example, to show up and small lecture and then tell us that the US government has no money for climate change solutions, that it has to come from private sector. And I was like, but the United States is the biggest culprit in causing climate change. There should be reparations. The United States should be funding directly from the exchequer because they have benefited. They've benefited from extracting resources out of Africa, and they have benefited from throwing up carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere. That's where their wealth comes from. So what does he mean that now the government is all of a sudden not engaged, that it's the private sector that is going to that Africa should, even solving the climate change issue, that they're from it, that they're still looking for a way to profit from it, because obviously any engagement between Africa and the American private sector will be lopsided. So where we went wrong, and perhaps this is a lesson for our government in future, because I suppose organize other summits in future, or maybe other African climate summits that will come in the future, they must first of all finance the summit themselves. Don't ask for donors to finance a conference. It's not that expensive to finance a conference. So then when you're financing the conference yourself, then you have the moral authority and political clout to actually dictate and the terms of the conference. So my advice is, A, you cannot lock out the world from this discussion. The world must absolutely be engaged. But B, you must drive the conversation yourself. And the only way is to, at the very least, finance your own conferences. Thanks.
Patrick, because I can see Imelda even shining from the background.
Yeah.
Imelda, before you take over, Patrick. So, but is it even possible to have this without foreigners in place? And by foreigners, even if we're talking about the Africa Climate Summit, then foreigners would even be our neighbors in the first place. But how do you continue working on a format of the African Climate Summit that allows contribution from outside, both outside and within? And who are the exact players in the people acting on the ground and the people making the policy?
I think what should happen is, first of all, we should organize another African Climate Summit that only involves Africans, and then we use that to figure out our priorities are and how to rest of the world. And then organize another summit where now we invite people and we tell them, hey, listen, this is the way it is, and this is our and if you don't do ABCD, we're not going to do ABCD. Figure out where our leverage lies. Okay. If the US government has the ability to turn to the private sector financing climate projects, fine. The sector will just raise taxes on them. Our president is very good at raising taxes. We raise taxes 500% on their lithium or on their other precious minerals. That's our climate solution. Otherwise, we tell them to take a hike. That's what I think.
Imelda, take over, please. Take over from there. I won't even ask the question. You know what will be asked.
Oh my God! I think shots are being fired.
Hello.
I know. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Patrick. It's okay.
I think when we talk about, first of all, I think foreigners are not necessary, but because of how things are designed, we don't have a choice. Mind you, as much as we have experts of our own, those experts are not involved in as much research on the continent and do not represent the global organizations on the continent as we would hope. We know here that even when those organizations that Patrick mentioned earlier settle in Kenya, they still have foreigners as Africa lead. During the conference, I was so surprised to see how many organizations are in Kenya who have their head of Africa, Africa lead, director of Africa, coordinator of Africa region, all white people, foreigners. And I'm like, okay, that is where the problem is, because when we come to the summit, we have to bring whoever is representing Africa. So the problem is not who we invite in Africa. The problem is who represents us out there. And so when we need people to have to sit down and have a conversation, yes, those people will come, because guess what? They are not there because someone just planted them. They know what they're talking about. We have a lot of research. Only 1% of the bulk of research in the world comes from Africa. 1%. And so you have that. Even if we don't know what, even if something is happening in Kitale, that foreigner has probably done his research or their research on what's the soil like, what's the lifestyle, and so they are in a way better suited to tell you what's happening in Kitale, even if you live there, because yes, you've experienced it, but you haven't studied it to understand. I mean, again, coming to studies and education, we have different ways of doing it. Others by observation, others by this whole research methods. So these are different. But all I want to say is that I don't think we have to hit on the fingers of these foreigners. But I hope that as they are coming, like Patrick said, they're not coming to lecture us. They're not coming to bring solutions to us. They are coming to tell us, this is what, through my organization, we have been able to do. What do you suggest we do better? From that perspective, I understand. And when Patrick talks about, having our own summit, I think we had that. That's one of the reasons why I think this ACS was a brilliant start, to other summits, and a very interesting way of, launching the summit history, the climate summit history of Africa, is that there were regional consultations that were organized in each region. We can get into the content of that, into how they were organized, and into whether or not they were efficient, but those were organized. So we sort of had our own summit here, and that's why this ACS was a platform to share what's happening in the rest of the world, especially from those who couldn't attend physically. So we had consultations from Central Africa, West Africa, even North Africa. So we had representations, and that I could call our own sort of internal summit amongst each other, before bringing these results now to the limelight and saying, this is what the rest of the continent thinks. Like I said, we can talk about the content of that, how it happened, whether efficient or not, but we can't dispute that we had our own sort of family meeting before presenting our findings and our problems to the rest of the world.
Sorry, let me get that right. Are you saying we should have, or now with the next summit we should?
No, they happened during this before this summit happened. There were regional consultations. Yeah, there were regional consultations. In fact, when we attended, there were delegations representing these regional consultations, so who brought their regional recommendations. And I took part in the youth regional consultation for Central Africa. So that's how I know there were regional consultations. Youth, I don't know about the main ACS, but I know for youth, African youth, there were regional consultations, and we had delegations from all these regions, bringing their recommendations, and that together formed the youth recommendations for during the AYCA that was presented to His Excellency President William Ruto.
Sorry, what's the AYCA? For those who don't know.
African Youth Climate Assembly, which happened from Friday to Sunday, immediately before the ACS started on Monday.
Yeah, good. And just because I realize I have some experts on this on this conversation, and because we've just talked about using jargon, because AYCA, I mean, not everybody knows what that is, among other titles that we've mentioned. For those who need the climate dictionary, it's on the link, the climate dictionary, which is an everyday guide to climate change. We've just put it on the chart. That's climatepromise.undp.org, and then now you can find the climate dictionary under that. We've just put the link on the chart for your access. Wanjiku, I think because also people are very keen on talking about people on the ground without context. But at the same time, please don't agree too hard. But at the same time, we also realize that there's still a disconnect. I like that Hilmelda has actually spoken and said that there were there was a pre-summit, for lack of a better word, pre-summit before the official ACS summit. So maybe from your perspective, I would like to know and like information on, do you think the people on the ground also appeared at the pre-summit, or was this another one of those, number one, you need to know people, or number two, you need to be at a, for lack of a better word, different status of life to be a part of the pre-summit by itself? Because already we know for the ACS, there were some challenges on who was being represented. Let us hear your thoughts around that, and you can expound
Wahiga,
further.
let me interrupt briefly.
Oh,
Wahiga, Wahiga,
yes. Okay, okay. Relax. Yes, sir.
hello.
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Yes, we can.
We can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear. Hello, Patrick. Okay. And then he disappeared. Patrick? Okay. Patrick, are you still there? We can hear you. We heard you the first time. Okay. As you get it together on that, Wanjiku, you may proceed. Oh, but we can't hear you. But we can't hear you.
Oh, I think
So,
she says yes. You can't hear me, so go on.
oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Maybe let's get it from you, Lucy, then. I think you can pick on the same question. It's okay.
Okay, sorry, just repeat the question.
Just because we were talking about, again, the people doing the action on the ground and the people making the policies, or the people or high level of influence. From your perspective, do you think even pre-summit, the locals were involved, the people who are not only experiencing climate change, but also the people who are doing the action? Do you think they were quite involved, not only in the summit, but also the pre-summit?
Okay, so what tends to happen in such summits is that you're not physically going to see these people here. What you see is a representation of these people, and will you? So the question is, was there a representation of these people? And to some extent, you'll say yes, because you could hear talks from people saying, "I'm from this county, I come from this country," and that kind of thing. I'm a youth representative. I'm a representative of the indigenous community, and that kind of thing. But the main question is, are these representatives really relaying the needs of their people? Because there's something that we call tokenized representation. Tokenized representation is where, yes, you hold the seat, you're getting the money, but the voice that you're putting out there is not a representation of the people that you are representing down there. And I was very happy to say, to some extent, I was happy to some of the representation that was there, especially for youth. I was particularly impressed by one, a representative who is a youth representative from Zimbabwe, and she was very vocal and said, and she was addressing this to governments. Do not just involve young people when you need trees to be planted somewhere, or when you need your cleanups to be done somewhere. Involve them even in decision making and in policy making. And that is where the gap is. A lot of climate change activists, a lot of community based organizations are doing so much, but their activities to actually be integrated into policy, that is where the gap is. And that gap, I will say, is a gap where, is the government really listening to its people? And then do we have the right form of representation? Because unfortunately, what happens with governments, for example, one regime will come and it will leave. But then, if so much was already done, and what the partnerships they had formed, the kind of projects they had done, had not been integrated into policies, and another regime comes in, they form new partnerships, and what we end up having is a cycle of talking about the same thing, talking about, we need to include this person, we need to include this person, but we are not seeing the result. And I can say there's a gap in representation, and also there's a gap in integrating what these people, what the indigenous people, what the people on the grassroots are saying into policies. And now from policies, we also have a gap in taking these policies and taking an action on it on implementation. And a very good example, for example, and I was very glad that the African Development Bank admitted to this. They spent a lot of money on early warnings. I know you remember, like sometime in 2017, the dominant language in climate change was disaster management and early warning. But then they did so much early warnings and produced a lot of reports. But what is lacking is early response and action. So, for example, we had a whole government stand in front of people and tell people, by the way, guys, in 1 month time, we are going to have El Nino. It is an early warning. What are we supposed exactly to do with that kind of information? What have you put in place as a government to ensure that, the way Wanjiku was saying, education is not going to be interrupted in this period? People are not going to be misplaced, because again, misplacement of where people live is something that we are anticipating. We are not going to have a situation of food security and death of livestock from El Nino, because early warning without early action is not enough. And so that's why I'm saying that we are investing in segments, but then this is supposed to be a segment. For example, early warning should be accompanied by early response and action. And I can say that is where the gap is. There's also a gap in representation, and I can say there's no really efficient representation of what people want. Another example I can give is, we saw a lot of money being given to county governments. Yeah, I'm curious to see how exactly. I will just hold my judgment on that, but I'm very curious to see how exactly they are going to use that money to ensure that El Nino is not going to affect people and their property and their livelihoods. Yeah, if we do not see that, we are going to come back to this conversation again and say they failed. Yeah, but for now, let's just give them that benefit of a doubt. Yeah.
Wanjiku, can you hear us?
I can hear you well.
Good, and we can also hear you. But before you take that, I would just like to mention that the African Development Bank, AFDB, is a multilateral development finance institution, not necessarily a government, which has been there since September 2014. And the AFDB is a financial provider to African governments and private companies investing in regional member countries. I would like you to continue with this conversation, that is Wanjiku. Just talking on the conversation that Lucy has alluded to, on representation, inclusivity, and also inviting government. But for my audience, before we even continue, I would like to mention that today's show will be continuing for a bit longer than usual, just because we have a very heated conversation today, and we wanted to try cover as many angles as possible. Thank you to my very generous panelists. Wanjiku, before you continue, and because Lucy has mentioned about giving money to the counties, and because one member of parliament, Honorable Peter Selassie, has been mentioned quite a lot, I would just like to clarify, according to him and what he said, all those criticizing me on how I responded about climate change should vie using their English and become MPs in their constituencies. I was not elected to talk about climate change. I am putting that out there as I quote him, not my words, his words. Wanjiku, take over from here. Thank you.
Starting with that point about Honorable Salasia, he is the representative of the people in the House. Members of Parliament are our representation. So it is upon them to remember when floods hit Budalangi. A month ago, Garissa, Marsabit areas were the people who were affected by floods last year. They were given 4 goats per household. Then, exactly a month down the line, there is an early warning. El Nino is coming. Do we have dams? Do we have water pans ready? Then what happens come January? We are busy fundraising for food. Kenya for Kenyans, we need to feed the people up north. I mean, come on. We can do better. But the thing is,
Wait. Before you even continue, Wanjiku, I repeat. Let me. I'm not reading my own. I'm not paraphrasing. I'm not. saying anything different. I repeat, in his words, our honorable MP said, kindly, you should vie using your English and become MPs in your constituencies, because I was not elected to talk about climate change.
I'm going to respond to his good words. When floods hit his parliamentary area, he will come to parliament with whatever language he wants to speak. In parliament, we speak English or Swahili. We don't speak our own dialects. And he will want to tell us how they do not have food or how his people need help. We will not be about English. We will not be about Swahili or Luya or Kamba or whatever language you want to purport we were elected to speak. We will be about the people and their needs and what climate change is doing to them, which is a fact. So telling me that my language should take me to parliament, I'm not here to go serve in parliament. My service is in the field to serve the people, and I serve them the best way I can. I learn their language, I explain to them the best way I understand and how it will work for them on what we can do together to better their lives and to better their environment. When hunger hits Turkana,
So before,
the MP of Turkana will not be telling me the people of Turkana speak whatever language, they're Nilots, I'm a Kikuyu, and I will go there with food that are fundraised in Nairobi, a cosmopolitan entity, or across the world to feed them. It's not about language. He's a representation of the people, for the people, by the people.
That's how you know he had no point.
Yes.
Bringing up language. What's that?
That's a petty excuse.
Hilmelda, and I'm coming back
Sure.
to you, Wanjiku, on inclusivity and all. I'm coming back to you. Hilmelda, and just because you've made sure that you're part of that conversation. And also, if we have to say it, then you're also part of the foreigners, in quotes, but still part of the necessary conversation around ACS. On Let's Create Africa, this webinar, we talk about governance. And having one of our leaders say that climate change is not their concern, is that in place or out of place? Do they know their role? Or maybe is the climate change language difficult also? Because maybe that's also a probability. Okay, please take over. Don't give me that face. I am just asking the question.
Can you? I mean, I know you're asking questions, but I'm saying no. You can't be the devil's advocate for that long. It's not possible. Like that is the problem we have with our governance systems. Electing people who have no idea of what emotional intelligence is, and who are not even intelligent in the first place. Like forget about EQ. They don't even have IQ. Because how do you base? How do you, as representation of a whole people, a whole community, a huge community, respond to the lousy words you shared with us on social media? At least that's where I saw it from. Telling us that we should use our language to buy. What kind of excuse is that?
Sorry, and maybe you can give us insight. Is that a Kenyan problem or an African problem, or even across the globe?
That's not Kenyan. That's across the globe. Because we can start talking about how American politicians take the mic and they say absurd things, and you just wish they were not. That's something that I would regret. But that is the problem we have with governance worldwide. You know, electing people who were elected for the wrong reasons. Because he's clearly telling you, my sister, I'm sorry, I wasn't elected to solve the problems you think I should have been elected to solve. And then we know now that when people are talking about lobbying during elections and how people are bought, people are placed, then you understand. Because when I keep saying these things, you know, democracy in Africa and how we should rethink elections and, you know, even choosing people that we put our faith, our trust in, we should rethink that whole process, because we have people like this who are actually put there to be a marionette or to just, you know, be a placeholder. You go, you just be there. We know what we're doing. So I'm very sure that other people sort of, you know, telling him what tune to dance to, and he's just, you know, following that. So I would say, as an MP. He's supposed to find out what is the nexus between climate change and the different problems we are facing in my community, and how am I using this platform during this ACS to voice those problems, voice solutions that the people in my community have come up with, instead of telling us, he said, even the way he was speaking, when he's opened his mouth, I knew this one will say something stupid. He was stammering all over the place, his mouth, he was looking at.
And that I believe is with all due respect, right?
I mean, if you ask me with no respect at all, I can't respect anyone who doesn't respect the people he's been elected to represent. I am sorry, and I always, I mean, if you know this, if you're in my inner circle, I always speak without holding my tongue. There's no way that sort of person I'll call him honorable. I mean, there's no honor there. Sorry.
Now we get back to Wanjiku again. Again, please, with all due respect to our leaders, and noting that we choose who we are. Wanjiku is in this a good time to also explain inclusion, diversity, etc., because they are buzzwords that we enjoy using, but maybe we don't really know what we are implying. So maybe I can let you take it.
Let me start with the point, and I found this very fascinating. When the COPs are happening, we have our African youth, we have our African leaders in attendance and championing whatever else we are busy championing. But for the first time, I've been an avid follower of Greta, and for the first time, ACS was happening. She didn't say nothing about Africa. She didn't participate. She didn't respond.
Hey, Lucy, relax. But is it a
Yes,
problem?
it is.
It's an
No,
African climate
it's an
summit.
African
Was
climate
it
summit.
a conversation?
No, it's not a conversation, but she has something to say. She is a powerhouse to influence. There are people and youths in Africa who keenly learn from her. She has a voice. She has an impact. She didn't use it for Africa. She didn't stand for anything that is Africa related. What does that tell us? It's about the positions we take. It's about the choices we take
But
on
wait,
leading our people.
Wanjiku, sorry.
Yes?
Sorry to
Yes?
interject, but you said this is for Africa,
Yes.
of Africa, by Africa.
Yes, I agree.
So why do we need her to comment for us to be able to be validated or vindicated
Let
on what we
me
want
talk
to talk about?
In Kenya we have Liz Wathuti, we have Patricia Kombo, we have Cheche, and a couple more who are globally acclaimed in matters climate change and championing. In Uganda we have Vanessa. Vanessa was busy on the streets with a lot of youths who follow her. Then we have people from Zimbabwe, we have people from South Africa, we have people, Mr. Climate from Nigeria, we have people from Mali and all the countries up north. I mean, it was Africans standing for ourselves. We had African leaders speaking 1.2 points about what we can do and how we can do it. But at the end of the day, are you a role model for the world? Are you expected to impact with your action, with your deeds, with your social media posting? Yes, she was expected to talk. Right now, we're busy talking about Africa being the center of carbon sinks. She will be there telling us what to do, but she will not be associated with the action on the ground and impacting our people on how to do it. Yet she's a powerhouse. I mean, come on. We have COP coming up in UAE. Then UAE came and became the biggest shareholder. They bought the biggest shares in carbon credits. The most silent carbon auction in Africa that was held in Kenya in June. The reports only came out like 2 or 3 months later. Yes, everybody is interested in Africa. So as much as we said it's an African summit for Africa, the moment they made it their business by funding us, by turning up to our African summit, then we expect them to be liable.
Lucy, you are clapping. Please share your thoughts.
Yeah, the reason why I was clapping is silence from such a person means a lot, in the sense of Africa was communicating and Africa was not communicating to itself. Africa was communicating to countries that are causing the highest levels of pollution, but the effects are being felt by Africa. So there's a need to actually recognize that we have it's communication, yeah. So you have to receive the communication and say yes, we have heard. And if anything, the greatest phenomenon that has been used in this whole climate change activism is that climate change is a global disaster. But when
Mhm.
Africa is talking about it, it just becomes an African problem and not a global problem. There's a problem there, yeah? Because if you have been talking about it over and over again until when one stakeholder has decided to speak for themselves and then you're not giving feedback, then that shows either there's bias, and if anything, even if it was just a message of support, you know, Africa, we I cannot really understand what you are going through from an African perspective, but because climate change is a global disaster that affects everyone and also affects Africa in the greatest way, we recognize what you're going through. I think that was enough, yeah. But then again, also to go just to take you back to our MP and whatever they said, and it just saddens me because again, representation, I don't know what form of representation we'll have, because in such a situation you will ask, if your role is not to represent people on matters climate change, what were you doing? What did you go to do in the summit? Because you're diverting the attention. Stakeholders have come from all over Africa for a common agenda and to communicate something, but you're coming with ignorance to actually divert the agenda to the wrong things. This man was trending for a whole day when we had a lot of important factors that were being discussed. You can ask people what he said, there are memes all over, but people do not even understand what the Nairobi Declaration means, what resolutions were passed, what is Africa demanding, what is COP28. A lot of people do not know that, and that is the work of the MP. And then the sad thing is, members of parliament not only represent their citizens within the country, but they also represent them outside. If this is the kind of image we are sending outside, how exactly do you expect us to be taken seriously at the COP28 if our own parliamentarians do not even understand the needs of their people and how climate change is affecting their people? So this again becomes an issue, and I think it is very, very arrogant. And this is the kind of arrogance that shouldn't come from a member of parliament. Yeah. And I really hope that
Mm.
going forward, the president will take a stand on that and even get to a point of calling them out, because that again is actually undoing everything that has been achieved within the 3 days of the summit. It's quite saddening, honestly.
Yeah, it can be sad, but does it really reach the necessary people? Because you're actually saying the president should call this out, but it's been 2 days later, so I don't know how long you expect that to. And as they say, you see at least Kenyans see at least, you see the trouble, but we move on because we have so many other issues that we need to take, right? But that not being the focus of the conversation, you've mentioned something very important. He was part of the summit, and with the news that we received, a lot of people actually missed out on the summit. A lot of people
Wait,
who
Higa,
were
I
Yeah.
can't hear you clearly. I don't know whether it's on my end.
No, it's on his end.
okay.
Yeah.
His audio is
Oh,
There you
it's
go.
okay.
Yeah.
better now.
Yeah.
Any
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
better? Okay, good, good. So just to confirm, because you mentioned something about the attendance of the summit, and having the people, necessary people at the summit. So there were many people who missed out on attending the summit. I can see you smiling. I don't know if that's a very leading conversation. And many important people, because they were accredited to be part of the summit, but they missed out on that. So maybe the first question I would like to ask all of you, Imelda, were you able to attend the summit? A yes or no would do.
No. I mean, not at KICC, but there were
Okay,
other side events around. Yeah.
okay, no. Uh, you'll tell us later why not. Lucy, were you able to attend the
No,
summit?
just
Okay.
the yeah. So I
Wajiko.
attended the side events, but not the summit at KICC inside. Yeah.
Okay, so not at KICC, you attended the side events. I believe the same happened to you, Hilmelda?
Yeah, not at KICC, just the side event.
Okay. Wanjiko?
I didn't get the badge, but I did attend KACC using, I had to source other means because there were specific meetings that I really wanted to attend. And I did attend the side events.
Okay.
However, I found it interesting. Yesterday I was at the ADS, Anglican Development Services offices, only to be told by the director, and Anglican being the biggest church on matters climate change in Kenya, they were not able to get their accreditation. NCCK, they were not able to get their accreditation. So at that point, it hits me, oh my gosh, it's not only me, it's not only us. So many big people who are decision makers, who are policy implementers, who fund some of these projects were not able to attend those sessions. I mean, then who got to attend those sessions? We need to ask ourselves.
The president.
Hmm. Okay. I okay, easy, easy. So I was able to attend the summit, the main opening and the conversation around it. Um, I must admit, by flukes, I was able to use my media card to attend that. But I was one of the people who were accredited and didn't get their badges. So luckily, my media card helped, but there were conversations, there were rumors, there were also true factors around the lack of an opportunity to attend, number one. Number two, most of the accredited people weren't able to attend because at last minute, whenever that last minute was, they weren't able to get their cards. And I believe some of you were here. Number three, there were conversations around paying the secretariat, the ACS, that's Africa Climate Summit Secretariat, to get a badge, or better yet, just get even your name there. Uh, I actually know a person who was there for the last 3 nights, days and nights, trying to come to get a badge to no avail. I know this is an emotive topic to some of you, but I will allow you, in the shortest frame of time, to please tell us what happened in your case. Why didn't you get a badge, or you got a badge? How did you get in? And what can be done next to make it, I guess, attainable to even get a badge? I will let the person with the least violence, Lucy, to speak first. Let's hope you'll be nice. But Lucy, please, the floor is yours. Proceed.
Okay, here's the thing. I really got a lot of good things from the side events and also accessed like the summit, the main ones from the live streaming. But then the logistics behind that, of course, you're the one who said it is the first of its kind in Africa, so they're learning a lot and that kind of thing. But the problem with actually having that sort of system is it depends the fact that a lot of people tend not to trust their structures and governance system. So anything that has been organized or anything affiliated with government will tend not to be trusted by its people. So if this sort of thing is starting right from the beginning in terms of registration and accreditation, it will go all along, including the declaration and resolutions that you come up with. Because what people are going to do, they're going to say, "Me, I was not there. Me, I was not part of that summit. I just attended the side events." So there won't be receptivity in the product that you produce, which is the resolution Nairobi Declaration. If there's no receptivity in that, even when you try to push the agenda at the local level, nobody is going to accept it because it will factor back to the fact that my voice was not heard, I was not accredited, I registered. Some people got accreditation the way you're hearing all those claims, which again is very sad. And I can just hope that next time we do better. And even if we do not get to a point where everyone is going to to attend. Okay, first of all, the reason why I think they had such large numbers is to show people are interested. It was the first of its kind in Africa, and it also goes to show how much people do not trust their representatives. Because if, let's say, we trust our members of parliament and say, the fact that my member of parliament is there, I do not feel a need as a young person to go because I know my needs are going to be represented. That's a thumbs up for us. But the fact that you have a situation whereby the people who are meant to represent us are not going to represent us sufficiently, if anything, they're saying they do not see why they were not elected for that kind of job. As a young person, I feel the urge to fight for my place on that table so that my voice can be heard. So I will say how this will improve. Have frequent of such events so that even when you miss the first one, you'll know you'll have a chance in the second one. Also improve on representation, and then they can just do better on accreditation and logistics, and then finally harness on the power of digital media to ensure that it's available for everyone, because there are a lot of people all over Africa who did not have a chance to book a flight and come to to Kenya for the summit. Yeah.
Mm. Booking a flight. We'll get into that later. Hilmelda, continue on the conversation.
Yes, I completely acknowledge what Lucy just said. We heard lots of, again, rumors, because they're just alleged, that they had planned to receive this number of people or to host this number of people, but this number of people registered and were accredited or received accreditation. However, when they got to get the badge, their names were not there, or they were, given other excuses. And I think here, Kenya is one of, if not the country in Africa with the highest internet penetration. Why was this summit not? Why didn't they think to give it the hybrid perspective and to make it known? Not that morning some of us are learning, the opening ceremony or opening remarks, whatever, will be live streamed. These are events that, and I know they have the means. There's so many. I mean, if we talk about Kenya being the country with the highest internet penetration on the continent, then we are saying that we've gotten to that level of development where such summits, I mean, here we are having this webinar. We don't even know where people are, but we are having it. It means it was very possible to communicate this summit as a hybrid, summit, so that I don't even have to sign up, to want to be there, because I know even if I miss out on being there in physically, I will be there online. So that's one thing I think, they completely sidelined, or at least I didn't get the communication about. And the paying thing, I also heard it. I heard some people had to pay. And this just, lets me know that there was a lot of politics, a lot of siasa in the organization of this summit. This person, I mean, you heard things like the person in charge of accreditation is not the person who was supposed to send out emails. It's not the person. I'm like, why are we getting all of this information? As an organizing body, as secretary, I mean, if you have to call yourself secretariat, do secretary work. Let's not just have titles. There was supposed to be coordination, communication among, different focal points in saying, okay, I'm in charge of this, I'm in charge of this. What should I do in case I come across this? So that you're not doing things out of your own. You're doing things with the agenda of the whole organization. And I think there is that's where there was a problem. So for me, solution-wise, let's we are in a digital age, and let's align to it. In case we are organizing such things henceforth, let it be communicated as a digital event, so that yes, people will come physically, but even we don't have to rush to be there physically, because we know we can always join online. And if we can't join that day, we'll find that session online whenever we want to listen to it.
Wanjiku?
For me, number one, it was the short time given to collect the accreditation badges. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, deadline is there. I can't send anyone because I have to turn up with my ID. That's a problem. I was dealing with other factors. I was out in the fields. I come back Sunday. I queue Sunday from 11. By 4 p.m., we have foreigners coming in from Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, queuing with us. Some were crying. They paid flights. They came on road for 2 days. And getting to Nairobi, they're told, your name is not on the list. Your badge is not yet ready. I mean, that is incompetence. We need excellence. We need a spirit of excellence in Africa. We have this habit of not being accountable. So for the secretariat to tell us it can be done, I won't buy that. We have UNEP that holds very big meetings in Nairobi, in Africa. We have the IEBC that has systems that could have assisted. This was a government-led project. It could have done a government-led system of accreditation. This didn't happen. So somebody failed. Somebody needs to answer. Telling me we couldn't have what cannot happen. I mean, no, we can do better. Of course, it was the first time. We have time to learn, we have time to grow, but we need an accountability system. Again, I attended a lot of side events where we were given notebooks, which I found very weird. Every single day, today, this morning, I was given, I think, about 6 notebooks. For what? That is paper. That is trees that have been cut. In this day and age of being digital, it beats my understanding why we have to distribute booklets for climate change activists, environmentalists. We can do better. Come on, we need to get our act together as Africa, as Kenya.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been 1 hour, 36 minutes of a conversation around the African Climate Summit. And as Wanjiku reminds us, it beats the purpose to cut trees, to give merchandise during the ACS. Maybe another question is, thinking about the Africa Climate Summit, the number of flights that were taken to make it to the African Climate Summit, the number of cars that were still and are
Not
still being
electric,
used
not electric
by
cars.
still being used by our leaders within who attended the Africa Climate Summit with convoys of about 20 plus diesel and carbon fuel sort of cars, minus our president, who made a very good effort at doing a PR stunt by using an electric car. If we actually do a carbon collection and try to know how much carbon was produced by the ACS during a main climate summit. Maybe, ladies, you could say something around that. Let me start again, maybe with a bit of violence. Wanjiku, we can start with you.
That is for me the most aching point. I was on traffic one of the days in the morning, and one president passes us in traffic. 17 fuel guzzlers, one president, 6 outriders, and what are they called? The diplomatic police guiding him. In total, I counted 24 vehicles, taking one person to KACC. Come on, we can't be talking about emissions and footprints, and then we want to be paid and financed for what we are doing, and yet we are putting little action. Then we had Honorable Raila turn up again in his Gazlas at a lunchtime meeting, and we are busy talking about what we can do. We had our Minister of Energy sit and lecture people about what we can do, about how we can reduce, about how many vehicles. We launched 100 buses, public buses. Vyombo za wageni zilifunguliwa. Sijui kama Saturday zitarudishwa back in stock to be reused again next year. We can do better. Come on.
Hilmelda, please.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I completely agree with with what she's saying. And again, it comes back to who is implementing these things. Like she said, 100 electric public service electric buses were launched. These are for the Monanchi, people like me and you, maybe, to use. The people who are making these decisions for us have jets, have cars, are being escorted in, 17 non-electric cars, and we are wondering. Finally, I'm the one helping, because I'm using the electric bus to get to my house. You're not. You're using 17. I am helping, and you are spoiling. I don't even know what term to use. We are sort of going back. We walk one step and then five steps back. And then, like she said, we have a minister of energy who is telling us how to adapt um, 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 electric cars and more electric sort of tools. Yet he himself, or they themselves, used a non-electric vehicle to get to KCC that day. So I think that we need to preach water and drink water, and not drink wine. So yeah, there's definitely a disconnect there.
Mm-hmm. Lucy?
I honestly, I completely agree with you, Melda and Wanjiku, because I mean, what was that? And that's why I remember during the second day of the summit, there was something trending on Twitter, something to do with climate change scam, because what we're discussing, three words that dominated that summit: adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. But what was actually happening, by the mere fact of even getting there, by the same people who are uttering these big words, completely different, and it beats the agenda. It completely beats the agenda. And I don't know. I honestly, that's the one thing I don't have a solution to this, because I'm like, how can we get ourselves out of here? Because they're going to COP 28 and they're going to be asked, these things are going to come up. They're like, what is your rate of e-mobility in Africa? But you guys are not using electric cars, or what are you doing about this? And that is how they're going to be shut down. Like, wait and see. These are the same factors that are going to be used to shut Africa down. And the funny thing is, not majority of Africans are doing that. A lot of people are on ground doing the groundwork, doing the important work. But the people who are up there, the presidents who represent us, they're the people who are going to make this whole agenda to die. And it's quite sad. Yeah, I that's all I can say. It's quite
Mm.
sad.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're wrapping this up. So let me just read a few comments that have been sent out to us. Calvin Kamau, who says, we are learning. Thank you very much for this. Grace Joroge, who says, yes, I think she was appreciating some of the comments that were coming in. Good words from our leaders. So sad that we elect such shallow-minded leaders. It is good to note that we are the ones who elect them. I would like to reiterate on that. I also see a comment from Mushugi Nganga, who says, this is great. I have not had such conversation in a while. I am also picking another one from Joe, who says, I love he says, I love the violence being represented here, but minus that, there's so much I'm learning from the conversation. Thank you so much for that. Hilmelda, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. Just not a video.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, we can see you on video. But we are just wrapping up this, ladies and gentlemen. It's been one of our longest conversations on this webinar. But maybe something I would like us to finish up on, and even as we continue. So, what next after ACS, especially for those who don't know what's going on? What needs to be done better, and how can we do it better? And again, the third would be, what good has come out of the Africa Climate Summit? Because it's also good to just remember, being our first, there are definitely some positives that have come out of it. Lucy, because you're already here, maybe I can start with you if you don't mind.
Okay, let me start with the last question on what good has come out of these. I can say
That's
I'm
okay.
really proud of Africa. We actually made noise and the world was listening. Even as we could say, seeing foreigners coming in is to show that we actually can talk and people can listen and we can set an agenda. Yeah. But then my fear on that is this talk will die after this week, and by the time we are getting to COP28, we have already forgotten we had a Nairobi declaration, we had a summit, and we are going to start all over again. So my hope is that this conversation on climate change will continue. Another thing I would hope is to see a lot of citizen journalism, in the sense of, let's agree that there's a gap in how the media represents climate change, because there's no human dignity in how it is represented. We are still, I mean, just today in the morning I had a conversation that they were talking about carbon credits and that kind of thing. We need to see the human dignity aspect of climate change, the floods, the droughts, the El Nino, the food insecurity in it. What are people in the asals doing? How it's affecting health services, how it's affecting education. Yeah, so I just hope those stories are going to dominate the climate change agenda. But at the same time, I'm very proud of climate change activists, because they have people like Wanjiku who actually show what exactly is happening on ground and bring up these factors is what gives me hope. Another thing I would hope for is to see actually African governments implementing the big talks they were talking about throughout those 3 days, more so transforming economies in ways that are resilient. If a government projects is starting, let's not start from scratch. If we need to buy, for example, school buses, let them be electric. We don't really have to start with these and then talk about now we need funds to do this again. And it becomes a cycle of borrowing and complaining and blame game, and then now we are here and nothing is done. Let's start with green investment at the moment, and then from there, as we continue to like build adaptation, resilience, and mitigation, we are also moving towards a forward trajectory. Do I think the summit was successful? In a way, yes. In the sense of giving Africans an opportunity to be seen and also to showcase some of the works they're doing. I really met a lot of people who are doing work on ground, and I was really proud of that. But again, I really hope, do I think it was not successful in the sense of, I hope there will be intergenerational value migration, in the sense of, let it not be that we who are making so much noise about climate change are the ones who are going to benefit from, for example, renewable energy, and then the next generation come and they have to start all over again by facing mitigations and all that, because we can agree that what we're facing at the moment is an inherited problem. Yeah, so let's ensure there's that sustainability. And this is also now to thank you for this platform. I was so honored to share the platform with amazing people, Himelda, Wanjiku, and Patrick, and also to you, Waihiga. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Karibu sana. Who would like to go next? Himelda, Wanjiku?
I think I will go next.
Okay.
I will start with what needs to be done. We need to put our house together and implement proper planning and coordination. That's point number one. Number two, Kenya and Africa at large has a pivotal role on matters mentorship. We had the AYCS that happened, and we have a lot of climate activists, environmentalists who didn't make it to the summit, but who were looking up to some leaders from African continent, from South America, from Europe. We had European Union CEO on our ground. We had Antonio Guterres, UN boss on the ground. We had 32 presidents, African presidents on the ground. These are role models. These are people we look up to. I'm looking at a point where Elizabeth Watuti will come down to the people, where Vanessa will meet young people in Uganda and have a conversation with them at the ground level, not from our big hotels, not from Kempinski, not from KICC, but to that young person in Garissa, to that young person in Nandi who didn't make it to KICC. Interestingly, was when I had a conversation with people from the Senate in West Pokot, and the climate docket people are telling me they have no idea ACS is happening at places. What is that even? No, we need to get a better way of mentorship, of passing information, of communication. Number three, we need to have young entrepreneurs learn to adapt digital technologies. We have a lot of gaps in what can be done, and we have young people who are smart, who are capable of bringing technology and not really copy. Okay, of course, you copy and make it better, but not really doing it the European way, the American way, but doing it an African way to mitigate climate change and to enable mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, to create employment, to change the way we do our things, to even farming. We have young people who can do different stuff. Let's support them. Number four, we need to de-risk the youth and women who lead in entrepreneurship through financing. How many young people, how many women on the ground are able to access financing for their projects? Say, even setting up something as simple as a tree nursery. How many are able to afford the seedling? A pack of 1 kg of seedlings at Cafe goes to around 3,000. How many can afford a cotton 1 kg pack? They don't even know where they can source those seeds. Can we break down this information to the Mwananchi on the ground? Can we enable that small business so that we create jobs, we create food, we finance our ways of life and bring our people out of poverty? Those are the needs. Then, on some of the benefits that came out of this, I think I love for the first time in Kenya, we were told 50 billion shillings was lying somewhere waiting for the governors to first get the first package and then they get the extra package. I thought at some point tuliambiwa serikali was very broke. It was left with nothing for the coffers. And yeah, to realize all this money is on the table, then let that those money serve the people. Yesterday there was something interesting. I think it was on Citizen TV. They were discussing the end of the climate summit and what's in stake for us. And 90% of the citizens who responded said they do not trust the system, and the fact that the money is given to the government will roll down to the people. What does that say about our leaders? What does that say about our country? We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of in-house soul searching and recommitting to our calling and our assignments to our nation on how to better tell these stories. The African story must be told the African way and by us, but we must first change the narrative and how we work with the people on the ground. UAE pledged what, 4.5 billion
Yes.
to accelerate African clean energy projects. This could be used to jumpstart a pipeline for clean energy. I believe that's a very good result of the summit. We have the African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation that gave USDs in billions to facilitate youth adaptation programs. That was superb. Then we have the African First Ladies that launched a high level restoration platform. I hope that happens. If we can just get to 20% of that for Africa in the next 1 year, 2 years, when we are looking back, this year we're supposed to be doing the global stock take. Let's look back in 2 years' time and say our African first ladies have been able to achieve this for Africa. It was not just meetings at the pavilion. Then we have the launching and the signing of the Kenya's green hydrogen strategy, and Ursula von der Leyen, that's the European Union CEO, committed to 1.9 billion in investment grants for Kenyans for green hydrogen industry. That's a lot of employment opportunities. So I will say it was not really all that bad. Of course, we have couples of bads that came to the table, but a lot of good came out of it. Political goodwill, we are yet to see what happens. I'm actually looking forward to Saturday when vyombo za wageni zitarudi Kabat, and then kindly recall me on this table and I will have more to talk about that. Thank you.
Okay. Hilmelda, please, your comments as we close.
Thank you. I am very amazed, at the many things that Wanjiku mentioned, and looking at those pledges. I mean, we've had a pledge since Copenhagen in 2014. I don't know what we have to say about that. So, as far as pledges are concerned, I have no hopes at all. I have nothing to say for that. However, I think it was very um, 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 I want to say very helpful to see the president of the African Development Bank there, right from the Africa Youth Climate Assembly. He was there and he was telling, speaking with the getting questions. I mean, I wish you were there on Sunday. It was such a beautiful session to be part of. We had a panel of him, that is he's the president of AFDB, whose name I can't recall, and the His Excellency the President William Ruto. That was the
His
panel,
name
and
is Dr. Kiwome.
thank you. And they were taking questions from the audience and answering them live. You know how you're sent questions before, and then you come up with fictional answers, and then these were answers. That's where I got, to learn that President William Ruto and his government are working on a bill, that will regulate the carbon market in Kenya with the foreign standards. So that when you are coming to buy from us, those things for $1 for a ton, we don't want. We don't want. The same way you're buying them elsewhere, you're buying them the same here. And I think that was very interesting to see. Also interesting to see how many projects have been launched by the African Development Bank, with adaptation and youth. Because we kept saying youth are not equipped. We said, okay, we'll equip you. We have launched those programs. There's this amount of funding here. We have launched programs to equip you. We have launched programs to fund your solutions. And then I want to close by saying that I was proud. I mean, extremely proud to see that Dio, the Green Africa, I think Green Africa Youth. Wait, let me find it. Green Africa Youth Organization gave there, not these pledges, there and there, gave $30,000 to different youth organizations. I mean, youth created climate adaptative and mitigation solutions from different countries. This amount. So there was a pitch session where we had organizations from Madagascar, Uganda, Nigeria, all over, the continent, and they came, pitched their stories. What is it that they are doing, from algae farming to eco charcoals, among other, even integrating technology into some of these solutions. And at the end of that pitch session, we had a jury who voted the best 5 projects and gave them money right there. These are the things that we need. These pledges, if you're not coming to tell us exactly what's going to happen right from this conference, I mean, for me, that's the one tangible thing that happened, during this conference. The rest, lots of words, and words are very beautiful. They can make us hopeful as they can kill our hope. But I think for me, this was the best so far. And if anything, now I know what to look for. With this declaration, you look forward to them being implemented. But with these organizations, you know where they are. In Uganda, you know where they are in Madagascar. You can easily follow up on, okay, you were given this money because you pitched and said you needed this money to do this and this and this. What are you doing, and how is that helping the continent? How's that helping your country? How's that helping your community? So I think for me, those were the very interesting things I took from the summit in general, starting from Friday to yesterday. And as the week even continues, we are hopeful for more interesting outcomes of this. And all I can say is bravo. This for me was the best I could foresee, because a lot more worse could have happened to this ACS, yeah. But I think this was a very good start, and we hope that the next, which was announced to happen in Addis, will be best or better. Yeah.
Thank you. Just reading one comment, Frida Mutua, who says we should be able to cost the damage in the African countries from climate change, negotiate with the aim of foreigners' compensation, not looking at ourselves from a disadvantaged position, since we would like some funding. Ladies and gentlemen, even as we wrap up on this with 2 minutes to go, my panelists, what next? What do we expect next? What's happening next? What is the event we're looking forward to next? What next, really? Good things have already been said and done. What next from here, even as you close? And please let us know how we can reach out to you, even individually or as organizations. We can start with you, Hilmelda.
As we look forward to COP 28, I'm hoping
What is
that
that exactly? Sorry, for my
yeah,
audience who might not know what that is.
the community of parties. So it's an event that has been happening for the last 28 years, 27 years, and this year will be the 28. I think championed by UNF Triple C. You're going to ask me what's that as well. But it's meant to push forward the climate agenda at a global stage, with a global, platform, and find solutions, to the global crisis that we are facing, and basically bringing diversified voices and solutions, to the table to solve these problems. So as we look forward to COP 28 this year, I know for sure that the Nairobi Declaration will be read there, or at least summarized. But for me, COPs have not been very helpful when it comes to implementation. We just know you need funding to go to COP, or at least your organization, wherever you're working, you get funding, you go to COP to represent people. But then there's usually so much happening at COP that you are even confused, on what should I follow up. So many side events all over the place. So I would say, let that not be our focus. Yes, if you can attend, to be on the same page with what's happening globally, because even the G20 summit happened in India. So COP will be a sort of recollection of what's happening in the world. So if you can attend, of course, by all means do, but that should not be an achievement on its own. The achievement should be that out of COP we were able to do this and this and this. So we are looking forward to a more secure Africa, to a more sustainable, continent, and to a more inclusive, not because it's a buzzword, but because intentionally inclusive and diverse Africa, for the next generation, if there will be any. And my name is Himnelda Atenko. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. And yeah, I have been very, very happy to participate in this panel. Thank you, Wahiga, for the work that you're doing, for the platforms you're creating, and for the opportunities you're creating, as you call yourself, opportunities creator. Thank you very much. And for the connections you're making. Now I know Lucy. I've known Wanjiku for some time now, but at least, we keep um, 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 getting into these and broadening the spec. Because one thing that was said
Okay.
throughout this is that the space in Kenya, the climate space in Kenya is very restricted. Everyone knows the other. So it's good to see that. I didn't know Lucy, but she's also in this space, and to see how we can forge opportunities, collaborations in the future. Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who joined. I know it's been 2 hours. I don't know what I would have joined in today.
It's okay. Yes. Lucy, please. You're next.
Well, I actually thought I had concluded in my previous remarks, but basically it's just to echo the same. What I look forward to is action, action, and action. We've been speaking for a while, since 1975 in Stockholm, when the first climate change agreement was actually laid on paper. We have so many agreements, the Paris Agreement, the COPs for 20, come on, 27 years. I think we really need action now, and more so action from ourselves in terms of African centered action. And I think this is a good beginning. I also look forward to collaborations. I don't know whether Wanchiko knows this, but we were in the same school. We actually shared a gender class. I don't know whether she can remember that. She doesn't look like she does. But yeah, thank you, Wahiga, for bringing us together. Hilmelda, thank you for the good work that you're doing. I also look forward for more collaboration. How you can reach me? You can reach me. I call myself with my three government names everywhere: Lucy, Njeri, Irungo, as you can see from the screen. And also, you can follow my organization. It's called African Perspective, and on Twitter, it's called Afro_Peace. Yeah, thank you,
Thank you so
and good job,
much.
Wahiga. Good job.
Asante sana. I really appreciate you guys making time for this.
Losing Njeri Irongo and not Mwangi.
So yes, you're very right, actually. Yeah. Sorry. So we go to you, Wanjiku.
I think I will say just what Lucy said. For me, it's about the action. It's about implementation. We have made a lot of declarations. We've made a lot of promises. We've been given funds, quote unquote. Counties have received billions, 50 billion in waiting for grants for those who want to do stuff in mitigation, adaptation, and resilience in their counties. That's for Kenya. And for Africa, I believe the same narrative goes. Nobody's coming to save us. The idea of thinking funds are going to come from outside, that's a lie. We need to settle and we need to be the hummingbird. It is you and I who are going to take action, who are going to bring the difference in our nation and in the locations where we are at. Kindly, let's just plant that one tree. Let's not throw plastics all over. Let's look at our carbon emissions. Let's call on our neighbors, on our all our platforms. Let's call on people to be aware. Let's inform on the capacities that each and every person can act in mitigating, in adaptation, and in creating resilience for Africa, for ourselves and our future generations. My name is Wanjiku DK on all social media, Wanjiku underscore DK, and my organization at Kipepeo GH on all social media. It's been an honor to have all of us panelists on the table. And thank you, Wahiga, for this. Of course, I was very violent today, but yeah, we enjoy doing what we do. Join us, by the way, next week on Tuesday, we have a tree planting event in Olkaria, Naivasha. That's Nakuru County. It's open to all of us. You're welcome. And yeah, let's keep pushing and believing for the best. Someday, there's hope for Africa.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to an end of today's session, longest session we've ever had since the beginning of the Let's Create Africa webinar. But thank you so much for staying on for the whole 2 hours, 6 minutes, 38 seconds, and counting even as I continue speaking. Woo, we've had it. Lucy Njeri Irongo, focal person, Kenya African Perspective. Wanjiku Dorcas, founder, CEO, Kipepeo Green Heritage. Melta, digital forms and social media editor in Africa and Patrick Kariuki, co-founder Kenyan Foreign Policy.com. Thank you so much for joining us. It wouldn't have happened without you. And without further ado, I say thank you to you all for staying in tune of this. Today's audience has been 508 people that I see and that's amazing. That means we've got value in 2 hours. And something the ACS and other future events should borrow from us. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ohiga K. Muturi. This is Let's Create Africa, the webinar. Have a great evening. God bless you. And for my panelists, I am looking forward to continue having this conversation even after this show. Good evening and God bless you. Thank you.
Bye.